Hello everybody, my name is Kenitria Byers. I had chapters 1 through 3 for the TSC book. And just as a brief summary to get you up to speed for the scene that we're going to go ahead and do today, the book opens up with Dr. Julius getting his annual physical, and his doctor sees something that's potentially hazardous for him, so he sends him to a specialist, a dermatologist. The dermatologist reviews his lesions on his body and believes that he has melanoma, which is a form of cancer. And so they do a biopsy and a few other tests. Long story short, it's determined that Dr. Julius does indeed have cancer and that he has a very short amount of time to live. He's given at best a year of good health. And in that time, he begins to evaluate his life and try to go over different readings and things to try to cope himself with essentially essentialism and the fact that he knows that he's not going to be here forever. He's coming to terms with those things. And in coming to terms with himself and trying to make himself feel better about his situation, he begins to review his client files. And in doing that, he comes over a particular client of his that he was not really successful with in treating. And he speaks to that client and asks to, meet with that client and see where he is in life to determine if he was really successful in helping him or if he wasn't at all. And so this is the scene in chapter 3 where he meets with Philip, his former client, to discuss some things. So I'll be playing the role of Julius, and my companion here will be playing Philip. Thank you.
Well, it's been a long time, really long.
22. I just looked over my records.
And why now, Dr. Hertzfeld?
Does this mean we're finished with the small talk?
Basic interview technique, Dr. Hertzfeld. You know the routine. Establish a frame. We've already set the place, the time. I offer a 60-minute session. Incidentally, not the 50-minute psych hour and the fees or the lack thereof. So next step is to move to purpose and goals. I'm trying to be at your service, Dr. Hertzfeld, to make the session as efficient as possible for you.
All right, Philip. I appreciate your why now. It's never a bad question. I use it all the time. Focus on the session. Gets right down to business. As I told you on the phone, some health problems, significant health problems, have resulted to my wanting to look back, appraise things, evaluate my work with patients. Perhaps it's my age. A summing up. I believe you'll understand when you reach 65.
I have to take your word on summing up process, The reason for your wish to see me or any other client again is not immediately apparent to me, and I experience no inclination in that direction. My clients pay me a fee, and in return, I give them my expert counsel. Our transitions ends, then we part. They feel that they've got good advice, and I give them their full measure. I can't possibly imagine wanting to revisit them in the future.
Well, let me just start by thanking you for humoring me and agreeing to meet. Here's what I want. First, your view of our work together, how it helped you and how it didn't. And second, and this is a tall order, I'd like very much to get a full briefing of your life since we last met. I always like to hear how a story ends.
That story has not ended yet. In fact, my life has a remarkable turn in the last few years, and I feel it's just now beginning. But I maintain a strict chronological and start with my therapy. Overall, I have to say that my therapy with you was a complete failure, and at times consuming an expensive failure. I think I did my job as a patient. As far as I can recall, I was fully cooperative, worked hard, came regularly, paid my bill, remembered dreams, followed your leads as you offered. Wouldn't you agree?
Agree that you were a cooperative patient? Absolutely. I'd even say I remember you as a dedicated patient.
As I recall, I saw you for 3 full years, and that was a lot of time. We met twice a week. That was a lot of hours, at least 200, and about $20,000.
A drop in the bucket for him.
Well, as I stated with you, I was at the meander of my existence and in trouble with my apps, working as a chemist and developing new ways to kill insects. I was bored with my career, bored with my life, bored with everything except reading philosophy and pursuing the great riddles of history. But the reason I came to you was my sexual desire. You remember that, of course, don't you?
I do.
I was out of control. All I wanted was sex. I was obsessed with it. I was insatiable. I shuddered to think of the way that I was and how my life was led. I attempted to seduce as many women as possible, hundreds, possibly thousands. And immediately after I had my compulsion, I was able to live fully, harmoniously. And that was when I came in contact with a great minds of the past.
I remember you in your Austin crashes in Zeno.
Yes, and those and many others. But the respite, the compulsion, free time were too brief. Now I am liberated. Now I dwell in high realms of all at all times. Let me continue to review my therapy with you. Isn't that your primary request?
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, it didn't replace the sexual compulsion, but merely coexisted with it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember anticipating each hour that we did. I think we strove to understand my compulsion from the standpoint of my life history, figuring out as we always tried to figure out. Yet every solution never helped me. No hypothesis was well argued or well rounded, and of course, not one had the slightest impact on my compulsion, and it was a compulsion. I know that you had to stop cold turkey. It took me a long time, but eventually I realized that you didn't know how to help me, and I had lost faith in our work together. I recall you spent many inordinate amount of time exploring my relationship with others, and especially with you. It never made sense to me. It didn't even then, and it still doesn't now. As time went by, it became painful to meet with you. Painful to keep and exploring our relationship as though it was real or enduring or anything other than what it truly was. It was a purchase of service.
That's straight. Thanks, Philip. Now the rest of your story. What happened to you since?
Well, let me see. Let me start with my work. My expertise was in developing hormonal agents to block insect reproduction, an important implication for the company, and my salary escalated. But I grew profoundly bored with chemistry. Then at the age of 30, one of my father's trust funds matured and it was turned over to me. And it gave me my freedom. I had enough money to live on for several years, and I canceled my subscription to the chemistry journals, dropped out of the workforce, and turned my attention to what I really wanted to do in life, the pursuit of wisdom. I was miserable, still anxious, still sexually driven. I tried other therapists, but none helped me, not any more than that what you had. One therapist who had studied with Jung suggested I needed more philosophically therapy. He said, for as an addict like me, the best hopeful release was a spiritual conversation. His suggestions led me to religious philosophy, especially the ideas and practices of the far west. They were the only ones that made any sense. All other religious systems seem to explore the fundamental philosophical questions, but instead use God as a method of avoiding true philosophical analysis. I put in a few weeks at a meditation retreat that was without interest. It didn't hold the obsession, but nevertheless, I had the feelings that there was something more that I had to find out. I had to find a way to manage the through sliding doors. I continued the sexual hunt, and as before, I had sex with lots of women by the dozens, by the hundreds, sometimes 2 a day, once a day, same time, seeing the same one as often, sex once, occasionally twice, with the same woman, then moving on. Never exciting after that. You know the old saying, you can have sex for the first time with the same woman only once. The last comment was meant to be a joke. Oh, a little bit of humor, Dr. Hensfield. I remember you said that it was remarkable that in all our times together, I never told you a joke.
And what happened then?
Then one day, I reached a monumentous decision. Since no therapy had helped me in any way, and sorry to say, Dr. Henson, that includes you.
I'm beginning to get that particular point. No apologies needed. You're simply answering my questions honestly.
Sorry, didn't mean to dwell on that. To continue, since therapy had not been the answer, I decided to heal myself. The course of stimulating that the thoughts of the wisest men who ever lived. So I began began reading the entire corpus of the philosophy, starting with the Greek gods, from pre-Socrates and working my way up to Popper, Rawls, and Quine. After a year of studying, my composure had gotten no better. I arrived at some important decision, namely that I was on the right track and philosophy was my home. That was my major step. I remember how much you and I talked about never being at home anywhere in the world.
Yes, I remember that too.
I decided as long as I was going to spend my years reading philosophy, I might as well make a career of it. My money wouldn't last forever. So I entered the PhD program at Columbia. I did well. I wrote a complete dissertation and 5 years later had a doctorate in philosophy. I embarked on a teaching career, and then after a couple of years became interested in and or applied, or as I refer to think of, clinical philosophy. And that brings me up to date to today.
But you haven't quite finished telling me about being healed.
Well, at Columbia, midway through my reading, I developed a relationship with a therapist, the perfect therapist, the therapist who offered me what no one had offered me before.
In New York, eh? What was his name? At Columbia, what institute did he belong to?
His name was Arthur.
Arthur?
Yes, Arthur Schopenhauer, my therapist.
Schopenhauer? You're putting me on, Philip.
I've never been more serious.
I know a little about Schopenhauer, just cliches about his gloomy pessimism. I've never heard his name being mentioned in the context of therapy. So how was he able to help? What?
I hate to cut you off, Dr. Hertzfield, but I have a client coming, and I still refuse to be late. That hasn't changed. Please give me your card. Some other time I'll tell you more about him. He was the therapist meant for me. And I didn't exaggerate when I say I owe my life to the genius of Arthur Schopenhauer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, too. Your card, sir. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.